We're here for Worldly Experiences, and our guest for today is Maya Cozier, filmmaker from Trinidad and Tobago. Welcome, and thanks for being here. We're really excited to hear more about your film industry work and what you're starting off on, and a great career already begun, really. Not we're going to say starting, but you've already begun. Tell us a little bit about what you have in progress right now in film and what your current status is with working in your projects.
Yeah, I shot a micro budget film in 2019, and I it got selected to premiere at Tribeca Film Festival, which was really exciting. So I spent a couple months in New York editing the film and getting it through the full process of post-production. So that's the last thing that I worked on. I am currently enrolled at graduate school at Columbia, and I'm using that as an opportunity to start fleshing out an idea for another screenplay that I hopefully can shoot by the time I graduate.
Mm-hmm. All right, so a lot of things happening, and the big even during this pandemic time, you're busy with a lot of things, working on the school and working on screenplays. Tell us a little bit about the beginning point for you. What was the beginning point of thinking about being in film, being a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean, my background is actually in performance. So as a teenager, I spent a lot of time with an all-girl dance group, and we were constantly performing at gigs. I remember going to school and then afterwards looking at Beyonce videos and like pop videos and trying to imitate them with my friends. And I spent a lot of time performing and being on stage. I also modeled a lot when I was younger. So I would model for carnival bands, and there was one really exciting time. I think I was 17. So this at that time felt really exciting. But when I was 17, Nicki Minaj flew to Trinidad to shoot a music video with Hype Williams. And I remember being on set and seeing, you know, a full camera crew. There were 3 or 4 steady cams on the street and a monitor and a director and Nikki, and I just found the whole thing so exciting. 17-year-old me thought that was like the most exciting thing ever. Mm-hmm. And so I think I always had an interest in performance, and I was always, even though I wasn't behind the camera, I was always in a setting where I felt like I was learning. And so when it was time to apply for college, I actually wanted to go to art school, not to dance, but I wanted to go to art school because both of my parents are artists, and I also have a background in painting and sculpture. And I just felt like I knew I wanted to be a creative, but I didn't quite know where I would fit in. And when I enrolled at the School of Visual Arts, I started taking film courses there. I took a documentary course where I had to make, I think, a 5 to 8 minute documentary. I decided to make that documentary about my best friend, who's a dancer. And I visited her at a circus where she would tour as a limbo dancer. I shot this 5 to 8 minutes documentary, and I really fell in love with the process. And that was the first time I ever made anything. I remember I shot it, I directed it, I edited it. I did everything from beginning to end. And it's just a very small film, but I found that process of also making a film about something that is personal and close to me, and sort of like, you know, having the lens and being able to explore something that just felt like an extension of my reality almost, because she is my best friend. I knew her, I knew the world that she was in, and I found that like very fascinating and also very powerful, like being able to have a camera and tell my own story. And so, yeah, I fell in love with the process, and then I just, for the rest of my time at college, I just made films, and I continued to make films, and I branched off into writing and doing more narrative work. So I only really like discovered film I would say at the college level.
Right.
Before that, I was a performer. Yeah.
So you had, it sounds like a lot of things set you up to push you in this direction. Something you really discovered about yourself. This is something you'd like to do and something you'd enjoy doing. Tell me a question about, I always like to ask something like, when you did that and you found you liked all these different parts of it, was there any part of it you found you didn't like, or was a real obstacle or difficult, something you had to overcome to finish what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there was a lot of difficulty. I would say, I mean, it was like my first time making a film, and I think I remember there was some tension about whether or not they wanted me back. So my friend worked at a circus as a dancer, and there was some tension about whether or not they wanted me backstage, because that circus actually, unfortunately, still has animals. And the animals aren't featured in the documentary, but they still have animals in cages. And I think there was this huge fear from the stage managers that I might film something backstage. I mean, I could have. I might film something backstage or upload something online or kind of reveal something to the public that they didn't want. So it was very hard to, one, get it approved. But then after I got it approved, it was like, okay, you have 1 day here to shoot, and then we don't want to see you again. And
Right.
so with a documentary, you can understand how impossible that is. Once you have all the footage and you start going through it, you're going to realize, I need this and I need that, and they should have gotten this, and you have to go back and you have to continue shooting and developing your story. But it was like 1 day and that's it, you shoot and then bye. So I remember there was a huge challenge where I didn't have enough footage, and I think I came up with this crazy idea to maybe give my friend my camera and have her, you know, go back to the circus and buy a ticket. And I tried all these different solutions, but none of it quite worked. So I think that was a challenging thing, like just kind of getting the permission to do what I wanted to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of the complexities of making things happen, almost like the producing.
Yeah.
Side of
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
It's a challenge. Certainly, it's got to be a challenge if you haven't done it
Yeah.
many times before. But you
Yeah.
found the technical things, working with cameras, lights, microphones, all those things. You had other people too, I assume. But you've taken to all the technology pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing that my undergraduate school is really good at. They do really teach you the technology. So I felt like, because I was also working, you know, on a very small scale, I felt like I had a pretty good grasp of the cameras and sound and being able to get it done technically. Yeah.
Some people come to it because they like the technical stuff first.
Yeah.
You're
Right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
yeah, the aesthetic, the dance, the storytelling. Tell me something about storytelling and your growing up, your culture. Is it a big part of that? Is that what drives you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, storytelling is a huge part of our culture, and culturally, carnival is a highlight for Trinidadians, and there is a strong tradition of oral storytelling. A lot of the characters that you see at carnival time come out of a long history of slavery and sort of like fighting the oppressor. And so it is a kind of a hybrid culture where
Okay.
it has, you know, African roots, but it's also, you know, influenced by you know, Europe. So the culture of carnival has so many different characters that we all become familiar with as we're growing up, like the Midnight Robber, the Blue Devil, and it's always this event where they go out onto the street and they give, you know, long monologues, and it's very theatrical. And I think, you know, storytelling is something that has always been a part of my culture, like Trinidadian culture, and it is very fascinating now to see how that culture that we've known growing up as being something that's very oral, beginning to slowly transition to film. as we're getting more access to technology and it becomes more accessible to shoot a film. I'm finding that really fascinating because not a lot of films have been shot in the Caribbean. More films have been shot in Jamaica that have gotten a lot of attention, like Better Must Come, you know, Rockers. You know, there are a few films from Jamaica that people generally recognize. Harder They Come.
Yeah.
But in Trinidad, you know, there's not that many, and only in the last 5 years we've seen maybe 2 or 3 indie feature films coming out of the island, but it is a medium here that feels very new. And it's interesting to see how we're like finally getting the tools to be able to like tell all these stories and put them into a cinematic space. Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly will happen with lower cost technology and easier distribution. People are going to do it. It's going to like
Yeah.
like in Nigeria or all over Africa. Many.
Yeah, Hollywood is such a big industry now.
Yeah. So you think you'll be? I mean, I'm sure you'll be a part of that movement. You may be the leader of the move of that, as far as you know so far. But do you think you'll bring along younger people? I mean, you're pretty young, but do you think there's younger
Yeah.
people going to be seeing what you're doing too and be inspired by that?
Yeah, I mean, that is the hope. I mean, there's so many young people that I've met because I went to school in New York and I returned to Trinidad right after. So I've been here for 4 years, and there is that hunger from young people to learn and to make films. And so many young people that I've met since I've been here have their own cameras, and it's easy for them to download editing programs onto their laptops. And you could see that thirst and that desire to like tell their own stories and shoot their own films. And yeah, I just hope, and you know, my hope since I've been here is to sort of, you know, allow opportunities for them to be on set. So when I started shooting Sheep Paradise, there were many people, many undergraduate students or who, you know, volunteered to be on set. And for them, the idea that somebody went away and studied film and actually, you know, like how, you know, they've been on larger set, like to them, that is so, it's like very exciting, and it kind of gives them that feeling that, yeah, they can do this or they can go further with this thing that they love doing.
Now, in watching the trailer for your film about with dance,
For the show,
she said,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's the
there.
trailer for the show. Yeah.
I mean, your dance background obviously makes a big difference in the way you shoot all the dance scenes, the rehearsals, the tryouts, things like that. Does that make a big difference to have another skill, another area that you really love and know about?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually think so many, I mean, it's countless filmmakers come or actually start from a different background. So I've just enrolled at Columbia, and there are people who have undergraduate degrees in medicine and engineering, and it actually is a benefit to sort of have a different experience and then bring that into this world of film. I remember someone once saying, you know, if you've always wanted to be a writer and a filmmaker, then what are you going to write and what are you going to film? You know, like, are you going to write about writers or are you going to film filmmakers? Like, what's your story? And I think it always does help to sort of have like a background or like a different background that you're then bringing so that you can tap into those experiences, write about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen beginning level or first films, and you think the filmmakers say their background must be in anxiety. They're putting anxiety on the film, and it's true.
Yeah.
It turns out to be true. Would take the thing you're really good at or know a lot about first for your first film. You can't do just anything. Take what you know, and it was pretty obvious you knew a lot about the dance world to put that on film so well. And music too. Are you musical as well?
No.
Okay. There's a lot of music involved, so
Yeah.
you must have a good feel for it, certainly. Tell me about more about the industry, the potential for a film industry in Trinidad. Do you think that is it going to be is it going to take the form of theaters, of studios, or do you think it'll be small scale, independent and grow from there in neighborhoods or regions. There's even
Mhm.
regions probably
Yeah.
too. To have those kinds of differences, you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a conversation we always have, because if it is to become an industry with studios, Trinidad would then be a location that, larger studios or Hollywood movies go to if they want a
Mm.
location that feels like an island, or, somewhere in the Caribbean. Um, it could go in that direction, and that's possible if on the island we have trained crew, we have the equipment, but those are gaps that, because of economy, we just haven't been able to fill. So I really think the solution is independent filmmaking and people, on the ground telling their own stories, making smaller scale films with, smaller budgets,
Mhm.
and really trying to find ways to get those films onto, streaming platforms and through distribution. Yeah.
That would be great. We're going to see. Obviously, I think the world is always looking for new places and what's the culture coming out of new places. And certainly you have the chance to do that
Mhm.
when we are doing that. Tell us more a little bit about your process. You're working on writing right now. What's the hardest part of that, or what's the part you really enjoy about that? Give us something about uh,
Yeah.
screenwriting process. What is it to you?
Yeah. The thing about screenwriting is that it feels like you're always doing it, even though you're not writing.
Yeah.
I I find the hardest part is just actually doing the act of writing, um, because sometimes you can become paralyzed just waiting for inspiration to strike,
Uh,
and there is a discipline that you have to develop where you write no matter whether or not you feel inspired to do anything.
mhm.
But for me, since I shot my last film, I would say, even though my process for writing recently has been looking at films more, that have a theme that I feel like I'm interested in exploring, or reading things that aren't even screenplays, screenplays, but just reading books and literature that I feel can be informative. So yeah, I mean, I think that, that's kind of where I've been. Recently, I've been very interested in blaxploitation films and Afrofuturist films. So I've been watching a lot of strange B movies, and things like Sunra, and Space is the Place, and all sorts of, and so like that's kind of, and by watching those films, I feel like, in a way, like, one thing that I do is I have a notebook, and I always I take notes whenever something occurs to me. So whenever I look at something, I feel like that's a process of writing. Whenever I read something and I write it down, that's also like a process for me. And so then I can pull from all these things when I actually do sit down to write a screenplay.
Do you think that you're starting your film school, graduate film school at Columbia with screenwriting? Do you think that learning those you're going to be almost learning rules about it? Do you think that's going to help you do it, or do you think in some cases I like to see people do things the way they want to do them first
Yeah,
before they learn the rules? Which is more important to you?
yeah, yeah. I mean, because yeah, so there's so many great films that have been made from a very intuitive place. I mean, there was that film that Netflix did a story about the making of Dolomite Is My Name, and the story of him trying to make that film, knowing nothing about film and hiring all these students, and then when he took it to studios, they said, "Oh my God, it's the worst film I've ever seen." But then it became a cult classic, and everybody, like, I just find like that kind of process of people making a film without knowing the rules or studying it formally, I find that very fascinating. And some of the best stuff you see comes from that place. But I also don't see uh, anything wrong with sort of like knowing the rules, and then you can decide after if you want to break them. So for me, yeah, I do feel like the academic setting of graduate school is kind of giving like me a foundation, And yeah, I'm actually okay with learning like what works, how things are done, because every story has a, it has like a formula, and then like, having the choice to be able to sort of throw everything away and just kind of go in whatever direction I feel inspired to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds good. I mean, I get to watch so many international films on Netflix now from around the world.
Yeah.
This too, and sometimes I'm seeing, well, this is somebody who's trying to play by the rules, or this is
Right.
somebody who's really speaking from their culture point of view and the
Right.
way they see things differently, whether non-linear or from different perspectives at the same time, or magic.
Right.
All those kind
Yeah.
of things. I really love it when those things come through.
Yeah.
You can see that. Do you think there's parts of you that are going to come through like that?
Yeah. I hope, I hope so. Not recently, but like one of the most fascinating films that I saw recently was Atlantics. And did you see it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, on Netflix. And what I found so interesting is that it started off as this, it felt like it was just this coming of age international film that I may have seen many times before, but then all of a sudden it switches genres and it becomes, this completely different film. And I, I find that like so exciting when you can start becoming playful and start doing things, even Burning. I feel that South Korean film, I feel like they switched genres halfway through the film as well. So yeah, like sort of, and I wouldn't say it's that they're breaking the rules, because these things have been experimented with, before, but I do find that sort of playfulness, being able to kind of experiment and sort of bring that element of playfulness to your craft is yeah, something that I try to do. Yeah.
When you made Sea Paradise, did you have an overarching message you wanted to show? I mean, was there something you strongly wanted to communicate? It seemed like it. What was it?
Yeah. Yeah. So the trailer you saw is actually the trailer for the short film, and then we got a grant to shoot the feature-length version of the film, and I co-wrote it with a friend who she went to NYU for screenwriting, Melina, and so we spent about 2 to 3 years co-writing the screenplay for She Paradise, and our process for developing that film was almost similar to making a documentary, because we spent so much time interviewing young women and interviewing dancers in that world in order to flesh out the characters and to figure out what story we wanted to tell. And from those interviews and from the stories that we got, which were all very personal, we began to realize a common theme, and it was mostly a coming of age arc that we saw throughout all these interviews. It was about young women, trying to find their voice, their place in the world, and understanding who they were, trying to find a sense of independence, leaving home and having certain experiences and things that they had to overcome. So from those interviews, we felt like, okay, this is definitely a story about girlhood, about teenage women finding their way, and that's the story that we want to tell, and that's what we stuck to when we started developing the screenplay for it.
Yeah, I mean that comes through the trailer. When are we gonna be able to see that online, or when do you think it'll be available, distributed?
Yeah, we're gonna premiere at AFI in the middle of October. Okay. They haven't announced it yet, so I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but it's fine. And so that will be the first opportunity that people can look at it online. And then hopefully within the next year or so, we should have distribution in place so that anyone can stream or rent the film. Yeah.
Great. One of the things young people who are interested in film certainly want to know about, or wondering, how do I make a living at this? I mean, everybody's not going to be hugely successful. in Trinidad, is it possible to make a living shooting a variety of things for TV or for the web or for businesses? I mean, could you do all
Yeah,
that?
yeah. I mean, personally, how I make money in Trinidad is commercial work, and that's how everyone on the island sort of makes money throughout the year. So what we do is we have to find a balance between the creative projects that we want to pursue and the passion projects and the feature films and the TV series that we want to do. And it is a very much of a community where we all come together and we have writing groups and we support each other and we work on each other's films for free. But in order to sort of pay bills and get things done, we work on commercials. So, like the last thing I did was a commercial for a mobile company in Trinidad. And it's fine. I mean, it's work it's freelance work and it's still within your field. And it's just really about finding the balance. So like whenever you're not doing a commercial job, you're developing a screenplay and writing. I know that the dynamic in the US would be completely different because there is an industry behind, feature films and episodic television. But in the Caribbean, because that industry hasn't quite taken off or isn't developed, a lot of filmmakers on the ground tend to rely on shooting ads and commercials. Yeah.
Well, that's great. So there's a community of people, so they're
Yeah.
and things like that. Any difficulty with getting equipment there? I mean, or the cost of equipment? Is it all available pretty easily?
Yeah, we have it's funny because it's so funny talking about this because we're such a small island, but we do have one production hub, and he has equipment. He has an Alexa camera. He has a Red. People, when they fly into Trinidad to shoot a film, they generally rent the equipment from him. So there is one place, exactly one place where you can rent equipment that's on a global level. I think crews that have had to fly into the country in the past to shoot may have had to sort of bring other equipment like on the plane with them if we didn't have everything.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting like an independent film shot, we do have the equipment to facilitate that on that level. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to a comment you made about co-writing script. So is a difficult process. Does that make it easier or harder to write a script?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it made it a lot easier. And I think it really comes down to the chemistry you have with the person and whether, like whether or not you're collaborators. So for Melina and I we are very similar in the sense that, yes, she has a Caribbean background, but she was also a theater major in high school and has a background with performance. I think she grew up in Florida. So we just, I guess, felt like our experiences were so similar. Ideologically, we're generally on the same page. We think similarly. We find the same things funny. So I think once that chemistry is there, the process of co-writing with someone feels very easy. And I think that's like the first step, I think if I tried to co-write with someone that I had nothing in common with, it would be a disaster. Yeah.
Oh, you're lucky. It probably does improve things a lot, or makes things easy when you have somebody right there to bounce things off of who's integrated with it as much as you are. Well, we have a couple of viewers. Let's give them a chance. They could type in questions in the chat box if they have a question for you. So we'll see if they want to add something or have a specific question for you about anything related to filmmaking. And you've done your own editing too on computers in your house. I mean, over time, did you do a lot of your own work on editing?
Yeah. So I am primarily a writer and director, but I do I'm able to do a little bit of everything, so I can edit if I need to, even though that's not my specialty. So like Gordon is an editor and would get hired to edit. I don't necessarily get hired to edit, but if I do shoot something, I use Final Cut 10, which is the industry standard, but I use that to edit my own work whenever I need to.
I mean, we've talked to other people about filmmaking and talked about the collaborative aspect of it as an art form. And one of the most important things besides in the collaboration being communication. Just for young people who are thinking about this, is it a skill you kind of naturally have it, I think. Do a lot of people have to build up that skill of communication and listening to be able to be good at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think communication is key, especially as a director, and listening is such a huge component of directing. I think also being a good team player,
Hmm.
and I think one of the most important things, because when sets succeed,
Hmm.
um, the director generally respects every single crew member, and there's that energy of gratitude for their work. And when people on your set feel appreciated, they just give more, and it creates this community feeling, where if a director comes on set and they're like, okay, I'm just going to tell everyone what to do and I'm the boss here and I'm not listening to anybody, those sets always fail. Like, I mean, they may succeed, but they're just generally unpleasant experiences. So I think, yeah, communication is such a huge part of being a director, making your team feel valued, making people that want to work on your film feel like they're valued, and that their opinions are valued. And there's also a balance too, because you don't want a situation where someone tries to like one up you, or like, you
Hmm.
know, like, or try to be the director. And I think that's something that you definitely like put in its place and you balance. But at the same time, you know, there's a way where you try to make everyone on set feel like they're heard and they're valued and comfortable.
That sounds great. I mean, I also always think about films from filmmakers from around the world. Think about
Mhm.
not just the history of where you're from, and you obviously have a you have a good connection to the history, and you know a lot about it, but the environment so different from
Mhm.
here where we are in the United States, or from lots of other places on islands.
Mhm.
Does the environment make a big impact on you for what you make?
Yeah, I feel like the environment makes it definitely makes a huge impact. And but a lot of my collaborators, and even the collaborators that I worked on for Sheep Paradise, are based in the US, because these are friends that I made when I was in undergraduate school. And what I find is, despite you know, cultural differences, there is a common language, and there is a common you know, cinematic language, but also their stories that feel universal.
Mhm.
And I remember, it's funny because Gordon's on this call, but I remember when I spoke to Gordon the first time, when he was like, just when we were going to start editing She Paradise. I think I might have asked him, like, do you know anything about Trinidad? And he said, no, but I know about the human experience. So you know what I mean? It's like, okay, this is a coming of age story about a
Mhm.
girl that hopefully anyone anywhere in the world can relate to.
Mhm.
And even though it's in the back on the backdrop of, you know, the Caribbean, that may feel like a new location to a lot of people, you know, it may feel culturally different or rich, that this is a story that feels like very much like home, regardless of where you are.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, but also I mean, what I've seen so far of your work, urban setting, the cities,
Mm-hmm.
um, the dancing, the clubs, the music, all those things. I haven't seen much anything with the sky, the beach, the water.
Right. That's
Is
interesting.
that
Yeah.
going to be part of it too? Part of your
Yeah.
vision?
Yeah. Because it's funny. I don't know if it was conscious, but Trinidad, unlike other Caribbean islands, relies heavily on, well, oil and natural gas economy. So we don't actually rely on tourism at
Oh,
all. I
yeah.
think we do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do get some tourism around carnival time. People would come to the islands, but a lot of other Caribbean islands rely heavily, or sometimes almost solely, on tourism in order to have an economy. And so the the images and like the culture around those islands tends to focus on resort life and beaches, and that hasn't quite felt true to my experience growing up in Trinidad. You know, like you actually have to drive like an hour to get to the beach, or like like I know what, like I'm actually not living right now, I'm not close to a beach, or you know, people go to work, like they have things, you know, so there is a feeling of like an urban lifestyle on the island. And I think also for Melina and I, Melina's Jamaican, but we, I guess, consciously felt like every film that we saw, like the general depictions of Caribbean culture in the mainstream always tend to focus on beautiful landscapes and you know, like beaches, and we consciously said no, like we want to show a different side. We want, even if it's gritty, like we want to show what life feels like here, what it feels like to just be an everyday person, you know, with things to do. And so I think maybe consciously we said, okay, well, let's try not to show show these images, because we felt like we wanted to change that. Yeah.
Yeah, I was feeling that it was more centered around
Yeah.
live and work and everything going on with people, and less of the
Yeah.
landscape, which is fine. There's other people do that. You don't have to do everything. We have a question about the Caribbean film industry. Do you find is it dominated by men mostly? I mean, are you struggling to get attention sometimes as a woman? Is it difficult to get into?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, 100%. Yeah, it definitely is. And even for, you know, the last thing I shot was a commercial for a mobile company down here, and you could tell that they thought of me or considered me as a possible director because the subject matter of the commercial was women empowerment. And I mean, yes, I did the job, but you can definitely, like, it becomes obvious. And I think, you know, being it's like the commercial industry down here definitely is dominated by men. And I feel like even on the agency level, they 100% do feel more comfortable handing budgets over to men or putting them into positions where they direct. So I think it's definitely something that's global, and it's definitely something that we need to continue to advocate for. We need to continue to advocate for inclusion everywhere, and it's something that we have to change. Yeah, and it is as a, you know, as a woman director, you do feel like that energy on set sometimes. So the people that I collaborate with, I collaborate with for a reason. A lot of cinematographers tend to be male. It's even more rare to find a woman cinematographer, and sometimes you may step on set and realize that a cinematographer is trying to one up you or make you look stupid in front of your cast or crew, like intentionally, and it's like those are things that you just have to constantly deal with, and that's why I would like collaborate with certain people, and it's also why on the ground, like a lot of women in Trinidad who are you know, filmmakers, we generally, like, the work is good. I mean, I actually think the work that I see from women directors down here is better, but that doesn't necessarily translate into who's getting the jobs. And so, like, we just have to, you know, support each other and just, you know,
Right.
and continue to speak out. Yeah.
Well, I've no doubt your talent and your persistence is going to help you overcome a lot of that, and you're already a force down there, I'm sure, for that. A couple of specific questions have come in. You have any plans or specifics for distribution of your that's going to be?
Yeah. I wish I could speak more to this, because the producers on She Paradise actually hired a sales agent who's been doing all the distribution work and the distribution strategies. So I know that he's constantly talking to distributors, and there's a method behind it. But I think he's waiting on a premiere, and then sort of is going to do the push and figure out where it's going to be. But I actually can't speak to that in detail because it's not something that I'm currently doing for the film. Yeah.
Now, a lot of young people looking at films here, it's almost overwhelming to feel like you got to do everything. You got to shoot, you got to write, you got to edit, you got to understand the lights, things like that. I think as you do more work, you narrow it down to what you really want to do and let other people do the rest. Do you have a specific in directing or writing? One of those going to be your direction?
Yeah, I definitely think I prefer directing to writing, but a huge part of why I enrolled at graduate school and I'm taking a lot of screenwriting courses now is because I always feel like I want to tell my own stories and I want the tools to be able to tell those stories. But I do feel like I am more interested in directing. And in terms of when I first started out, I did a little bit of everything. I mean, and then a lot of the earliest films I shot, like when I first started making short documentaries around the time when I first started school, I shot it myself. Sometimes I even did sound myself if I couldn't find anybody who was like available to help me with sound. I edited myself. So it's like kind of just, I think at the beginning, like that, be just throwing yourself into it and like doing a little bit of everything, because essentially every aspect is informative when you do specialize. So I think having to edit things on my own like allows me to be able to communicate with an editor as a director. Or, you know, I took courses in cinematography in undergraduate, like taking cinematography classes and shooting on cameras myself. It allows me to understand the cinematographer's process so that I can communicate with them better. So I think, yeah, just starting off by like just doing everything and then you know, using all that information when you're ready to specialize.
Mm-hmm. Is there anybody whose career you want to model your career after?
Who do I look? I mean, there's so many people that I look up to. But I think one thing that I really admire is what Ava DuVernay has managed to do with Array Films. She's created this distribution platform that has supported so many young Black filmmakers and given them careers and got their films noticed in ways that it wouldn't have before. If like Burial of Kojo, you know, that film, I think Jezebel, you know, all these films and all these young filmmakers kind of got you know, their career. I mean, I think the director of Burial of Kojo is now directing The Color Purple, you know, with Oprah. So I think I really admire that initiative that she's started. And I think in the future, I definitely do want to see ways of exploring similar initiatives in the Caribbean and for Caribbean filmmakers, you know, allowing us to have opportunities, not only for funding, but also just for distribution and finding outlets to get our work seen and out there.
And we see a lot of filmmakers who talk about the importance of film history. Of course, some of them know all of film history, like Martin Scorsese, who could tell you from everything possible.
Yes.
Now, if you have a young person from today who says, "Oh, I know film history from maybe the '80s,"
Yeah.
do you go back further than that, or what are your classic films that you inspired you to?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to watch so much, especially, you know, but I mean, I wouldn't say, in terms of films that were made that inspired me, I mean, I don't know if it goes that far back, but I would say something like Killer of Sheep, you know, like that was an early Black film that like really inspired me. You know, Daughters of the Dust doesn't go that far back, I know, but like a lot of those earlier like Black cinematic works have really been an inspiration. Yeah.
No, I would agree that sometimes film teachers and film programs think, oh, you have to know everything. I think at some point, a lot of the earliest things, because the culture's changed so much, technology's changed so much, audience have changed, it may not be really relevant anymore to say, oh, you have to know the classic films of the 40s or the 50s or even the 60s French films at some point. Maybe they lose their relevance to what's coming up and the way people are doing things today. We have a question
I
about
don't think
actors.
it's
Go ahead.
relevant. And so, you know, this. I mean, I've had to look at Fellini. I've had to look at Breathless. You know, I've had to look at all those. I've looked at all those films and I love them. And I think that I don't think they ever lose relevance. And I think there's something to draw from those films, even though it's not necessarily even if it doesn't feel like you can relate to them, I think there's always something to be drawn from those films. Especially Fellini, I feel like, I mean, you know, like visually, those films are so spectacular. If you're like looking at 8.5 or La Dolce Vita, I mean, those are films that you can just like stare at, you know, without any sound because they're so beautifully shot.
No, there's certainly a lot of great things you could know about, but I don't think I wouldn't put it as a test anymore to somebody. Oh, if you don't know that, you're not going to be
Yeah.
a filmmaker. It's not going to be a big we have a question about actors. Have you dealt with a lot of actors so far? How do you like working with or talking to actors?
Yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, I actually shot Cheap Paradise with non-actors. And that's a technique that it's a technique that is hard to pull off, but it is actually done, and sometimes for some people it's a preference. So I think I don't know if anybody saw Tangerine, but I think Tangerine was shot by Sean, and he cast that film from Instagram or something. He found, you know, like he found these girls in LA, I think, and then the film Florida project that he did afterwards, I believe he cast the lead character from Instagram. I remember Andrea Arnold for Wasp heard a girl yelling at her boyfriend in a subway, and you said, "Oh no, I love your energy. Like, can you be in my film?" So there's so many instances where people like cast from like just from the street or just from people they know, and that was something that I did for Sheep Paradise because we don't have an industry down here. So in a way, I mean, I could have used actors, but a lot of the actors we have in Trinidad have a theater background. And sometimes that is something that might not translate very well on film. Sometimes it may even be better to work with someone with no acting experience than a theater actor, because they're not like pulling from any training. But you know, and also with film, you may want to performance that's more subtle, or you know. So I think a lot. I actually, yes, I've worked with actors, but I wouldn't say that I've worked with trained actors, because most of the actors that I used for Sheep Paradise were just women who either were very close to the experience of the women in the film, who were actually like living in that reality. You know, a few of them were dancers, so they were performers, but not quite actors. So yeah, it was. And I found that like more relaxing too, because it was like, it felt like once they just relaxed into like being themselves, it felt like I had more to work with in a way, instead of working with an actor who was trying to like fit into a role. Yeah.
What do you think of the opportunities now that exist for short series that are so popular on Netflix and other places, 10, 15 episodes, or even running for a couple of seasons? Are you interested in ever doing something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great that people can just upload their content online, and then it goes viral, and they build their own audience, and they can directly communicate with their audience. I feel like that's so exciting. I think I'm not sure that didn't Insecure start that way as an online series. I mean, I think it's such like a brilliant way to get your work out there. And I think and then I think yeah, it's like this new time where you can go directly to, you can build your own audience and go directly to people and get your content noticed. Yeah.
Something said in Trinidad might be, very so unique. People would really want to see something from there and what's different about the place, and almost any kind of series set there would be interesting to people. People are
Yeah.
trying anything now that we're indoors and all the time and watching everything
Yeah.
possible. So that might be for a while. So I assume you'll probably be in New York next year. We hope at Columbia for film school. What are you looking forward to that? What do you think is going to be the biggest assets or the biggest things you're going to be doing in New York with film school and other? You're looking forward to?
Yeah, I think yeah, because a lot of people that I collaborate with, even the cinematographer Jackson, who I work with to this day, is based in New York. I've also shot music videos in New York. So the music video I did for Cranium, we shot that in New York. So I think in a way, New York is kind of like a second home, and there's always been this really exciting link between New York and Trinidad. Like people, my friends from there coming down here to shoot, and also what's so exciting about New York as a space is that there's such a huge Caribbean diaspora. So there is like a second home that is there, and there's so many great film initiatives there as well. There's a organization called CAFA, and they have a section at BAM in Brooklyn where they show Caribbean feature films and short films like once a year. I think it's called the Caribbean Film Series. And so they have a platform where they curate Caribbean films into BAM. So yeah, there definitely is like a very like vibrant and exciting like Caribbean film community in New York and in the city. And I'm like really looking forward to just kind of like, I mean, I feel like I've been there before, and I'm just looking forward to kind of being around all those collaborators and contributing to those initiatives.
For the graduate school experience, are there any classes you're really looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm really, I mean, I'm looking forward to all of the classes. I have to take directing and screenwriting, and I think I'm most looking forward to just taking screenwriting, because the main goal for enrolling at graduate school was to have the space to develop a screenplay that I'd like to shoot by the time I graduate, and so like I'm really looking forward to the process of being in a screenwriting classroom and being able to work with a professor to flesh out my screenplay and my ideas and to kind of make it into something. Yeah.
It's going to be exciting to see what happens and things you continue to produce. And just one or two last questions. What would you say to young people? How would you inspire young people who are thinking about film but thinking, oh, it might be too hard. This is too difficult an industry to get into. It's blocked off to me because I'm from the Caribbean or from a small town. What would you say to some of those young people?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I'm laughing because it is difficult. It is very, very difficult, and I think that I guess the biggest word that really stayed with me is perseverance. I think once you really believe in a story that you want to tell and you really feel driven to tell that story, you will find a way. So I don't think I talked about this, but when I first graduated from my undergraduate program in New York, I came back home to Trinidad, and I would say I spent about 3 years like I wanted to make a feature film as soon as I graduated, but that just didn't happen. That wasn't the reality. And so when I first came home, I actually worked at a film commission office that does a lot of admin work and bureaucracy for a year. And then when I got out, I wasn't sure what I was doing. So there was actually like that dream of like making a feature film as soon as I graduated didn't happen. And I spent a lot of time like not making the film. But what kept me going was the fact that all I needed, I didn't necessarily need a budget to make a film, but all I really needed to write was my laptop. And so even though there wasn't a budget or a grant waiting for me to make a film, I still had my laptop and I was still able to do things that cost me nothing, like writing, going out and interviewing the woman that I wanted to, you know, make this movie about. So all those things happened before there was any funding or before the project even felt real to anybody. I was still doing those things, interviewing people, writing the screenplay. And so by the time the grant came around, it was just ready to, it was, you know, we were just ready to go because I had done all that work before. So I think what got me to this point, or what kept me going, was just kind of like believing that this was a story that I wanted to tell, and that I would persevere, and that I would keep at it and keep going, even though it felt like, okay, like 3 years passed and the thing still didn't happen. So I think, yeah, that's like one of the biggest takeaways from that experience.
So they have to be persistent, and they have to have something to say. You can't just be in it because it's cool.
Yeah.
That doesn't get you very far today. I've got to have something to say. Very good. Well, thank you so much, Maya. It's been wonderful talking to you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It. And maybe we'll do this again when you're back, when you're up in the States. We'll do it again and hear more about what you're at and what you're up to, and give some links to your films, and so people can see what's coming up. They can go now to your website. We'll put that on as well. They can see your shorts, your music videos, and trailers. Great stuff to watch, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this.
Okay, we'll see you again. Thank you.
All right. Bye.